Welcome to Alfred Kazin Notes, a place where literature, ideas, and the minds of great writers come alive. Let's explore the thoughts behind the words.
And it's a truly profound set of words we're looking at today.
It really is. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a monumental work of the 20th century, George Orwell's 1945 masterpiece, Animal Farm.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we're drawing from a range of academic analyses, historical contextualizations, and literary study guides to really, ground our discussion.
Because our mission here is to look far beyond the surface of what a lot of people just casually dismiss as a simple farmyard fable.
Exactly. Or merely a strict one-to-one historical mapping of the Russian Revolution.
Right, because we know you, the listener, are already familiar with the broad strokes. You know who the figures represent in the historical record.
Yeah, that's basic high school English. What we want to uncover today is Orwell's really profound, enduring critique of totalitarianism.
The weaponization of language.
Yes, and that tragic, deeply human cycle of corrupted ideals.
Huh.
Okay, let's unpack this. We all know the basic architecture of the story, but how does a narrative about, talking horses and sheep transcend its specific historical moment?
Well, it achieves that by deliberately stripping away the complexities of human politics. It leaves us with the bare, visceral mechanisms of power. And literature possesses this incredible capacity to take massive, traumatic historical events and just distill them into an essential psychological truth.
It becomes a universal mirror for human corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By removing the specific human faces of early 20th century politics and replacing them with farm animals, Orwell exposes the primal mechanics of subjugation. We aren't getting bogged down in the specific agricultural policies of the time.
Right.
Instead, we are forced to watch the fundamental nature of greed and ideological manipulation play out in an enclosed, inescapable environment.
There is a biographical detail from the sources regarding the genesis of this story that really anchors that idea.
Oh, the cart horse.
Yeah, the cart horse. Orwell apparently found the core inspiration while simply watching a young boy, maybe 10 years old, driving this massive cart horse down a narrow path. And every time the horse tried to turn, the boy would whip it. And Orwell realized in that singular moment that if animals ever became truly aware of their own immense strength, humans would have absolutely no power over them.
It's a perfect metaphor.
It is. It's the perfect metaphor for the exploitation of the working class.
That image of the boy and the horse perfectly encapsulates the core dynamic of all systemic oppression. The oppressor relies entirely, fundamentally, on the ignorance of the oppressed.
Wow. Yeah.
The physical strength of the masses is neutralized by their inability to perceive their own power. Orwell took that stark observation and built a meticulous allegory.
Right. Let's map that out a bit for you listening, just to set the stage.
Sure. So Old Major, the prized boar who sparks the rebellion, represents Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, providing the philosophy of animalism, which is the book's stand-in for communism.
And Mr. Jones the farmer.
He represents the ousted Tsar Nicholas II. And then you have the two emergent leaders, Napoleon and Snowball, who represent Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky.
But what makes it so resonant is how he assigns these roles. He doesn't focus on the deposed human farmer's intricate political failings.
No, not at all.
By reducing the previous regime to a simple, drunken, neglectful farmer, he brilliantly captures how everyday neglect and petty cruelties are often the true catalysts for violent revolution.
Absolutely.
But that brings up a fascinating casting choice that always strikes me. Once the power vacuum is created, the pigs step in to fill it. But why pigs? If Orwell is dissecting the mechanics of tyranny, why didn't he cast predators? Why not wolves or bears?
The sources actually touch on this specifically. Orwell was quite hostile to pigs. He found them to be most annoying, destructive animals.
Really?
Yeah, he noted they were incredibly strong and cunning. And it's a brilliant, highly deliberate subversion. Because if he had used wolves, the threat would be obvious. It would be an external physical danger that the other animals could unite against.
But pigs are domestic.
Exactly. They are part of the internal community, and importantly, they don't actually produce anything themselves.
Right. They don't pull the plow, they don't give milk.
They don't lay eggs, they just consume what the laboring class produces. By casting the pigs as the intellectual vanguard of the revolution, Orwell forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth about human nature.
Which is?
That the very intellect needed to organize a rebellion, to conceptualize a better world, is the exact same intellect that can quickly learn to find the loopholes in that new society and exploit it.
That's That is chilling. Let's follow that thread into the erosion of those utopian ideals.
Yeah,
Because that intellectual cunning immediately starts looking for those loopholes.
it does, almost from day one.
When the rebellion first succeeds, there is this rush of pure euphoria. They establish the 7 commandments of animalism, unalterable laws, painted in giant white letters on the barn wall.
Summarized by that famous maxim.
Right, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But I have to ask, is that initial dream actually beautiful? Or is Orwell suggesting that the seed of corruption was already there the moment they distilled complex societal laws into a simplistic, divisive slogan?
That is the precise tragic flaw of the revolution. In the rush to unify the uneducated masses, the intellectuals reduce a complex philosophy of egalitarianism into a binary slogan.
An us versus them tribal marker.
Exactly. And the moment you establish a society entirely on opposition to an enemy rather than on internal justice, you leave the door wide open for a new oppressor to simply redefine who the enemy is.
And we see that slippery slope of power play out with such terrifying subtlety. The pigs don't just wake up one day and declare themselves dictators.
No, it happens in the margins.
Right. The pigs decide they want the luxury of the farmhouse. So the absolute law, no animal shall sleep in a bed, quietly gets an addendum.
It becomes no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets.
Yes. And when they discover whiskey, no animal shall drink alcohol, subtly shifts to no animal shall drink alcohol to excess.
It is the slow, agonizing death of truth by 1,000 tiny qualifications. The erosion of principles is gradual, almost imperceptible to the laboring animals.
And it culminates in that ultimate, devastating linguistic subversion. The commandments are erased, replaced by that single, terrifying paradox.
All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
The psychological violence of that phrase is staggering. It completely hollows out the word equal until it means its exact opposite.
It really does, and this is the vital takeaway for you as a listener. Ask yourself how easily political dogma can be bent into malleable propaganda in your own world.
Because the slow, incremental erosion of principles is completely invisible if you aren't paying attention.
Exactly. You accept a tiny compromise here, a slight rewriting of the rules there, and suddenly the foundational truths of your society are entirely gone.
And you don't even know when the shift occurred.
Right, but that kind of mass psychological conditioning requires an architect. It requires someone to actively manage the cognitive dissonance.
Which brings us to Squealer.
Squealer, the pig who represents the Soviet newspaper Pravda, and really the state's entire propaganda machine.
He is basically a one-pig PR crisis firm. He doesn't just spin the truth, he dismantles reality. How does he actually convince starving animals that they are full?
What's fascinating here is the sheer variety of psychological manipulation tactics Squealer employs.
Break those down for us.
First, there's the physical element of distraction. The sources note how, when he is delivering a particularly twisted piece of logic, he physically skips from side to side and whisks his tail.
Just to keep their eyes moving.
Right, so their tired brains cannot properly process the enormous logical leaps he is making.
A literal sleight of hand with rhetoric.
Exactly. But his most potent weapon is false science and circular reasoning.
Like with the milk and apples.
Yes. When the pigs hoard the milk and apples, Squealer claims that science with a capital S has proven that these are vital for the well-being of a pig, because pigs are brain workers.
Framing extreme selfishness as a noble sacrifice for the greater good.
It's a classic authoritarian maneuver. And then there are the false statistics.
Oh, the statistics. The animals are essentially enslaved, freezing, starving to death to build this windmill. And every Sunday, Squealer stands there reading off long strips of paper,
proving that food production has increased by 200 or 500%.
Forcing the starving animals to doubt their own empty stomachs. Orwell understands that when the body is starved, the sheer mathematics of a lie are easier to digest than the painful reality of betrayal.
And whenever the animals show even a flicker of doubt, Squealer deploys his ultimate tool, fear. That constant menacing refrain, surely none of you wishes to see Jones back.
Forcing a false choice between the complex tyranny of the present and the remembered tyranny of the past.
He even rewrites history. He gaslights the animals into believing Snowball, who fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed, was actually a traitor all along, blaming Snowball for everything, even the windmill's destruction.
You must always have an enemy to blame for the failures of the state.
Always. And this psychological warfare is most tragically effective on the working class.
Which brings us to the tragedy of the proletariat, to Boxer.
the deeply loyal, incredibly strong, uneducated cart horse.
He is the soul of this tragedy. He represents the exploited working class, and his tragedy is entirely rooted in his two deeply ingrained personal maxims.
I will work harder.
And Napoleon is always right.
He surrenders his critical thinking to the state.
Which leads to the darkest, most unforgivable betrayal in the novel.
Oh.
Boxer literally works himself to the point of total physical collapse building that windmill.
And Napoleon doesn't send him to a vet.
No. He sells Boxer to the knacker, the glue boiler, just to buy a single case of whiskey for the pigs.
And Squealer immediately feeds the animals a fabricated, tear-jerking story about Boxer dying peacefully in a hospital, praising Napoleon with his final breath.
The working class is literally consumed. But, we have to contrast Boxer's blind loyalty with Benjamin, the cynical donkey.
He's silent intellectual.
Right. Benjamin represents the intellectuals. He can read as perfectly as the pigs. He knows the truth of the tyranny, but he chooses to remain silent and passive until Boxer is taken away.
When it is tragically too late.
So what does this all mean? In the Grand Cuisine tradition, isn't Benjamin's silence a profound moral failure?
It is the ultimate contemplation on the responsibility of the educated. If you see injustice, does simply surviving make you complicit? Benjamin's cynical silence is just as foundational to the dictatorship as Boxer's blind obedience.
To really grasp the weight of this warning, we have to look at Orwell's context, and we need to be very clear and impartial about the history here. Orwell was a democratic socialist.
Yes, according to the biographical sources, he was.
He didn't write this book to attack the concept of socialism itself.
No. If we connect this to the bigger picture, he wrote it to expose the totalitarian nightmare of the Soviet Union, which he felt was a perversion of socialist ideals.
The warning is universal. Without accountability, power inevitably leads to corruption, regardless of the political system.
And yet, because of that context, the book was almost never published.
Right, because of censorship. During World War II, the Soviet Union was a British ally. British publishers rejected the manuscript out of blind loyalty to a political side.
Orwell even wrote a proposed preface warning of the English intelligentsia's toxic self-censorship. How they ignored Stalin's atrocities just because it was politically inconvenient.
That is the core of the warning. The mechanism of tyranny is always the same when truth is suppressed.
Which brings us to the chilling final scene. The exhausted animals look through the farmhouse window. They watch the pigs playing cards and drinking with the human farmers.
And they realize they can no longer tell the difference between the pigs and the humans.
Animal Farm is a masterclass in understanding how revolutions can be hijacked, how language can be weaponized to suppress the truth.
And how the oppressed can be manipulated into loving their oppressors. And for you, the listener, this is why this matters to you today.
It is a call to be vigilant.
To think critically and to never blindly accept the statistics and commandments handed down by authority.
Absolutely.
We want to leave you with a provocative final thought, drawing from the modern parallels mentioned in the sources.
The new tools of manipulation.
Exactly. In our modern world, algorithms and digital echo chambers act as the new squealers.
Skipping from side to side to distract us.
Using tailored truths and manufactured fear. So ask yourself, in an environment constantly trying to shape your perception, how do you ensure that your reality isn't being rewritten while you sleep?